So this is my perennial problem that I have to fix every year. So basically I've got an outside tap. Unfortunately it's a tap that in the winter when things start to freeze I can't drain it down. It's kind of on the main and there's no isolation possibilities, or not easily. And what happens is pretty much every year, of course, bits and pieces freeze, and the mounting that the tap screws into, the brass bit that you can currently see a Jubilee clip around, I'll come to that in a minute, basically cracks and then drips, and as you can see it's dripping. Yeah, you can see water's dripping, and actually underneath the Jubilee clip there's a fine crack. So so what I'll need to do is basically change that plate for a new one. I've got a new one. We'll come to the tools that you need in a minute. Now, yeah, so at some point I need to find a better fixing, which doesn't matter if it gets frozen, or find a way to put an isolation valve somewhere. But that's probably a job for another day. Anyway, why is there Jubilee clip? So essentially, the drip was much worse. So I basically put a Jubilee clip as a temporary measure in sort of December when it froze, around the brass part, so it squeezes it a bit more together to stop the drip a bit. But as you can see, it's dripping quite a bit now. So what we'll do is we'll isolate the water for the house, and then we will take the tap off, put a new plate on, reconnect it up, put some PTFE tape around the threads. You'll see that in a minute, and do that. But the first thing is to turn the water off. So for our house, to isolate the entire building, there's a little valve in the street outside the house. It's underneath this metal plate. It's always good to know where these things are. So if you ever had a water leak and couldn't isolate it for some reason in your house, you can isolate the whole house. So we just lift that up. It's completely okay to turn these off. You don't need any permission from anyone. And so open up that trap, and at the bottom of it, I don't know if you can see, but there's a tap at the bottom. Again, it's worth just knowing where these are and making sure it's in good nick. So if you did need to turn the water off for some reason, you know it's going to work. So of course we turn the tap to the right to tighten it off, shut it off. When you turn it back on again, open it fully and then turn it back half a turn. Always good practice not to leave valves at the end of their travel. Okay, so I'm just going to put my hand down there and turn it off. So luckily it is nice and loose, so I'm just tightening that. Did about 3 turns to turn it off, and that has now isolated the water. So we'll close the trap to make sure no one trips over it, or the plate on top, and then we will go and take the tap off. So before we start, the tools that we're going to need, tools and parts we're likely to need for this job are as follows. So we've got a new brass fitting. Actually, I think it's an old brass fitting, but it's in good condition. We use that. That's what we're going to change. Then we've got various tools. So we've got some spanners that we'll need to take the old tap off. We've got a screwdriver, flat bladed, that we'll need to open the little hatch in the street to turn the water off. I've got a regular posi-drive screwdriver to take the screws out, which the screws that hold this on. We may be able to use the old screws if they're in good nick. I've got some PTFE tape that we'll need to put around the threads of the tap, and maybe I'll put a bit of this LSX jointing compound as well, just on the threads to make sure they don't leak. This is a sort of like a silicone based substance, and you can put it on threads if you want to prevent leaks and that sort of thing, and it doesn't harden all that hard, so you can still unscrew the tap afterwards. Yeah, and electric screwdriver just in case we need to take the screws out, and I've got a regular posi-drive if we decide to use that. Right, so now we've turned the tap off in the street, we should be able to release the pressure by just turning the tap on, and that should run a little bit whilst the pressure reduces, and then stop to a drip. And in the meantime, what I'll then do is set the camera up on a tripod, and so you can see what I'm doing, and start the job. Right, so the first thing we'll do is we'll just take this Jubilee clip off, and of course that's perfectly good, so we'll put that back into stores for future use. As I said, that was just to hold the bit of brass together as a temporary measure to reduce the dripping a bit. So we'll just unscrew that. That should come off okay. Yeah, so perfectly good Jubilee clip for future reuse. And the next thing to use is adjustable spanner to take the tap off. I don't think the tap's all that tight actually, but we'll just do it with that. So that should spin off. So the tap we can perfectly well reuse. That's got no issues. The issue is simply with this part. Let me take the tap off first so you can have a look. The issue is with this part, it's got a very fine hairline crack in it, so we're going to change that. The screws look okay, and also the other thing we'll do is we'll clean up, we'll take the old PTFE tape off here with a little pick. Well, actually it's coming off quite nicely anyway, just so we've got a nice clean, and I'll dry it off too, nice clean bit of thread to put the PTFE tape on. So the next thing is to take the plate off. So, well actually I think what I'll do first is I'll undo this nut. So this is regular compression fitting, and we'll undo that. Goes that way, so that comes out. Again, we can reuse that on the Olive that's already there, no hassle, because that's not the issue, so we'll just loosen that. Okay, that should allow the pipe to come out, which it does. And now we can take this plate off. I think I've probably got the wrong screwdriver bit in there, but I think we'll get away with it. So let's just undo these. I think probably I will change the screws for nice new ones, because the heads are a bit knackered. Okay, so that's fine. So that's probably not fixable. I mean, one could braze it back together again, but I think I'll just bin it. I'll just pause the video whilst I get some new screws. Right, so I've got some screws there, 4mm by I think 40 or 50 millimeters long. They should be fine. So I'm just going to clean off the Olive as well, because that's going to of course be reused, and I will put a little bit of that sealant around it, just to make a good seal. So this is rather good, this stuff, so it's got a bit hardened at the end, but we will pierce that with a screwdriver, or actually with a screw will be fine. So we'll just put a little bit of that around the Olive, so hopefully you can see that. Doesn't strictly speaking need it, and this is approved for use with water, and it's not going to get mixed in with the water. So there we go. It's an outside tap, we don't drink it anyway. So that's on there, and we now need to get our new plate and put that on. So this is the new plate. We don't need to use the nut because there's already one there. So I'm just going to put that on, just make sure it's clean inside, so that it is, just make sure that's okay. And then we'll put that on there and just tighten this up loosely for the time being. We'll tighten it up once the plate's in place, and that's going to go on there. So again, using the electric screwdriver, we're just going to tighten this, screw this plate into this piece of wood, which attaches it to the fence. So let's do them loosely first, and then we can align it perfectly later. Okay, that's good. That one's not one in, two, and third one. Okay, so that's good and solid. That's interesting. Why has water suddenly started gushing out of there? Maybe someone's turned a tap on in the house and it's letting water out of the system. That is odd, I have to say. Yeah, it's just water. Someone's turned the tap on somewhere and water's probably draining back out of the system. So the next thing to do is to tighten up the nut at the bottom. This is the compression fittings nut. It's not particularly well, sorry, what I'm trying to say is you want to make it tightish but not overly tight. So we'll just nip it up and then an extra turn, and that should be good. And then the final thing is to put our tap on. So here's our PTFE tape. The important thing is when you wind it on, you want to wind it in a clockwise direction so that it doesn't come off when you tighten the tap on. So we'll just clean the threads, make sure they're good and clean. And my fingers are a bit wet, so it's tricky. But here we go. So we'll just wrap the tape around. I'd say give it a good number of turns, maybe it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You don't want to put too many, otherwise when you tighten it will split the brass. So, and then I wind a bit around here, around the base, so sort of bunch it up and wind it around the, you can't see what I'm doing there, sorry about that. Wind it around the base of the threads, because then the trouble with the taps is you want it to be pointing downwards, and the issue is if it's tight but basically at the wrong angle, that's really annoying. So this gives it a bit of it acts like a sort of a gasket, I guess. So we'll tighten that onto there, and let's see if we've got enough PTFE tape to make it sure it's vertical. So this is the issue comes here, you see. So okay, that should be fine actually, because now that's nice and vertical and should make a good seal. So I'm going to turn the tap off and then turn the water back in the street. I'm not going to film me turning the tap on in the street, it's pretty obvious. You just of course wind it open anti-clockwise fully and then half a turn back. So the water's back on in the street. I'm going to now turn this tap on. There may be some air in the system, so we might get a bit of air coming out, but we'll turn this on. And as you can see, it's running nicely, no problems. And when we turn it off, as you can see, it's drip free. So job done, all great. Pack up. I'll just check all the water's on the back on in the house, and everything's no leaks there. There's no reason they should be, and we'll take it from there. I think I'll just dry this off and then check that there's no leaks. A bit later, it should be all dry, as long as it doesn't rain. But I think we should be all good to go. Just make sure these are all nice and tight, pushed in properly, which they are. Yep. So I think that's going to be grand.